Welcome to The Art of Dress. Today I'm happy to share with you the refined classic style. The refined classic style has always had kind of a split personality, and the reason for that is because actually what the refined classic is doing is balancing some really important aspects of the human personality. So here we have Frida Gustavsson, and on the left you can see the image that kind of shows the restraint and sort of typical classic idea of the refined classic. But on the right hand side you see that she's able to wear a lot of ornament, and she's just luminous with all her accessories and everything else. So what is going on here, and how does someone actually connect both of these aspects in one style? So that is the riddle of the refined classic, and I should just point out that every style is actually a riddle waiting to be solved. So in the case of Frida Gustavsson, one thing that you're going to see if you look through her work as a model is that she's frequently in punk. And not only is she in it, but she's amazing. So what's going on here, and how does this affect the refined classic style? And the thing is that if you look at what's happening with punk, yes, there is a bit of an exaggeration going on, but there's also a great amount of texture. So just let me define texture for a second. Texture is an uneven surface. So corduroy is a texture. And another example of texture is just anything that's layered. So if you have a shirt and then something on top of it, like a jacket, you're creating a form of texture just by having those two pieces of fabric, one on top of the other. But of course, an epaulette, like you see here, is a very strong version of texture, especially in the way that it's done in this jacket. And so that's part of the clue of the refined classic, is the need to have a lot of texture. But there's another aspect to this as well, and that is that this kind of shows this sort of very strong outreach of personality. You could say enjoyment, you could say life, joie de vivre, you could say passion, all of these things. And this takes you back to something that kind of unlocks the idea of the refined classic, and that is the image of the moon going from the new moon, where there's very little light, to the full moon and back to the new moon. And I'd like to show you how this is actually helpful to the refined classic. So when you think about the light, think about light as design detail or ornament, because this is where a style shows kind of a playfulness and a lot of outreach, you could say. So if you were to imagine that this vertical demonstration of the different phases of the moon is actually superimposed on someone's body, in this case, Frida Gustavsson. So the moon, the full moon, would be encircling her focal point, which is the solar plexus. And so the full moon becomes actually, instead of a focal point, it becomes a focal region, or a region of ornament. And when you think about it in that way, then the ornament can go, would diminish up and down the body basically evenly. And obviously you would have more length to work with on the skirt or the pant, but you would also be able to just trail away the amount of ornament for a longer period of time, whereas on the top you would still end up with more ornament, perhaps on the bodice. But let me show you an example where this is really clear. So if you look at this picture, you can see that the belt, the wide belt, because the refined classic is an omega style. That is to say, it doesn't stay really connected to the body. It has like a fullness to it, a full skirt, a full sleeve. And then the ornament that is above the belt and the ornament that is below the belt are basically even. Okay, so that becomes your region of ornament, or your full moon. And it's pretty much balanced. So that's the first kind of balance that you see with the refined classic. So here is another example of a different kind of balance that is also very important for the refined classic. And that is, if you notice, you've got the lace and you've got the plain fabric with no ornament. So the refined classic, in addition to needing to have this region of ornament, there has to be a juxtaposition in a way, or a combination of plain fabric and ornamented fabric in order to achieve this balance. And a third kind of balance for the refined classic is what you see here, where the ornament on the top of the bodice is really thick and kind of concentrated. So that has to be balanced with the fabric that's used on her shoulder, which is so gossamer and like almost no texture to it. It's like spider webs, and it's just so amazing. So that's a third kind of balance that the refined classic uses. And so now we can see some examples of some of these aspects, but I also want to show you some examples of more forms of texture, because the refined classic really uses texture in almost every outfit in order to bring not only the ornament, but also the feeling of being an earth style, because the refined classic there's all different ways of describing styles, and earth style is one of them. But an earth style uses the V neckline, and this is, you can see even on this dress, a V neckline is created by the appliqued fabric, and then this gives strength to the shoulders and strength to the whole silhouette. And then the second thing that all earth styles rely on is texture. So here you see a really interesting example where it's not quite perfect, because you can see that there's a little bit less of a region of ornament above the focal point than there is below. So it would look even better if that print underneath the fabric, like the dark print underneath the pleated fabric, if it actually were the same distance. But it still gives you the idea. And then you have the pleated fabric on top. So you have the layering of the pleats, you have the layering of the fabric itself as a second layer on top, and then you have the opening out of the neckline. Very cute. And I should also mention that you can see with the yellow a scarf, or actually I guess it's a ribbon around her waist, or a sash perhaps. It's yellow, and that picks up on the yellow in the dress. And you can see by how good it looks that this is a style that uses, I would call that rhythm of accessories. And that means that things match, or they pick up on colors that are in the outfits. You also see that with shoes. So here is another example of use of layers. In this case, it's a shirt underneath this little kind of short awl. But there's a few other things that are going on here to start with. You can see another way of forming a V neckline, the easiest way. This makes forming a V neckline almost always available to the refined classics, so lucky. And then a second thing is that you have a lot of you could call sartorial details with the epaulets, and also the pockets with a pocket flap. And what is happening here with the pockets in particular is that the start of the pockets is where it's a horizontal line there, is forming the start of this region of ornamentation, and then it finishes with the pockets at the bottom and where the pockets end. So you have a defined region, very successful with the belt right in the middle. And there are other things that are used to form kind of texture here, and one of them is the print, the lines in the plaid of the shirt. Because really and truly, a lot of the texture of the refined classic often looks like it was hand done. It doesn't have to be hand done, but the fact that it could possibly require being hand done is part of this look. And as you can see, those little tiny stripes are kind of like tucking or something like that. And so very successful and pretty small in scale, in fact, because the scale of this style is very low, very small. It's not the very smallest, but if out of 13 possibilities, it's number 2. So it's the bottom 2 in terms of scale of that kind of thing, because belts are still wide because of it being an omega style. And then one other thing is that there's a lot of stitching there, and especially the stitching that's at the shoulder really strengthens the shoulder in addition to the epaulette. So it's very successful as in terms of transforming this into something that is great for refined classic. And here's another example of a way of creating texture. So I cannot even tell if this is actually ribbons that are joined together or if this is just printed onto the fabric, but it doesn't matter because it looks like that kind of texture is being created there, again, probably through handwork. And then another thing that's happening here is that you have the vertical lines that are opening into a V that pick up again after the horizontal line of the belt. So the region of ornament is vertical. So I don't know if you saw the video on style symbols, but all classics, including the refined classic, are basically have a sort of a nod to the vertical nature of the human form. And even in the refined classic, the spiral shape is straight up and down in the middle of the oval. And then another thing that's happening here is the focal point is defined so clearly because of the horizontal line of the belt intersecting with the vertical line of the top. So it's really very successful and beautiful. Another example of texture. So in this case, what we're seeing is very lightweight lace combined with very lightweight fabric. And that's appropriate because this is a style that uses very lightweight fabrics, number 2 again, out of 13. But so a couple of interesting things. First of all, because it's so lightweight and you've got this repetition going, it actually permits you to extend the zone, that region of ornament. And so it moves up like almost to or actually all the way to the shoulder, and then it can be longer on the bottom as well. So here you have a concept, and it's the concept of enough. How big does it have to be? It has to be big enough, and it depends on a lot of things. It depends on what else you're wearing it with. It depends on the weight of the fabric. It depends on how thick the ornament is or how heavy. All of these things, but here you can see that with the really lightweight, it extends the volume that the ornament can extend. And then just one other quick thing, as you see here again, that the way the lace is inset is forming the V neckline. And so it's really successful for her, and another really interesting way of forming a V neckline. So one more V neckline, but again, what we're really showing here is the region of ornament. And in this case, the vertical line is made by the pleating. Okay, so if you do handwork, you know this is how you start. A lot of different kinds of handwork is through this pleating. And in this case, it's held in place by the horizontal lines, which creates kind of the belt effect right at her focal point. And then another aspect of rhythm here is the way the neckline is repeated in the sort of peplum. And you have this beautiful region of ornament, very well defined and very effective, I should add. So I didn't actually pick out this picture to show you the beautiful applique that's used here on the bodice, but it doesn't actually continue to the skirt, so I would have preferred that it did because it would be even more amazing. But what I did want to show you is the sleeve, because here what you see happening is the width of the sleeve doesn't have to be quite that full at the top. It is an omega style, but not like super, depending on the person. But what does happen here is drawing attention to the exact place with the way the lace is positioned. is the exact place where the sleeve basically stops following the arm and opens out to hang straight. So it's not going to open out in a bell sleeve, and it's also not going to close in to a tight sleeve down the forearm. It hangs straight from there. And a slightly fuller sleeve can actually, like you could cut that off and wear, and then it's a slightly fuller sleeve on the top. But if it's a long sleeve, what you really want is you want that line to hang straight. And in a similar way, you want your pant line to hang straight too. And once again, what happens is it can be relatively fitted depending on how Omega your personal version of Refined Classic is, but when it gets to the place just at the base of the thigh, so before you hit the knee, you can see that it opens out and then it hangs straight. So it's not a bell bottom, it's not a boot cut, and it's also not a curved taper. Okay, it is a straight cut to the sleeve and to the pant. Now the silhouette is not straight. Okay, now this is where it's actually kind of hard to even do some of the 4 ornament styles, because the aspect of space that they are connected with is above and below. And the demarcation is actually usually the waist or the focal point. In this case, it is the focal point, which is a high waist. It's the solar plexus. So in everybody's style, one aspect is going to be tight or fitted, that is an alpha style. And if it's the top, then the bottom is going to be Omega. And if it's the reverse, then you're going to have an alpha line on your pant or your skirt, and your top is going to be more open. So one or the other. And in Frida Gustavsson's case, she is the sculptural, so she has a fitted top and a full skirt. And I just would like to point out that it's best if the skirt opens out at the true hip, which really usually requires what's called a gore, which is an inset of fabric. So you get this kind of really gradual and just very graceful skirt line, because that allows you to have a fit through the hip, and it also makes it possible to have this zone of emphasis or adornment, which is the full moon idea. And speaking of full moon, there's a very interesting way that this has been created. So I talked about the beauty of the epaulette, as in drawing attention to the shoulder, and also the kind of pocket flaps and patch pockets and things, all things that you find in a trench coat. And yes, a trench coat is a signature garment for the Refined Classic. It's a great style idea for all Refined Classics. However, in the case of Frida Gustavsson, what you want to see is, well, first of all, the fabric is soft, and that's for all Refined Classics. But secondly, for her, you want to see it opening out in the skirt, as it does here. You do not want, maybe some Refined Classics would wear the tighter version, but not in her case. But another thing that's happening here that's really very cool is that through the use of curved lines in the bodice and in the skirt, and actually finishing with that pocket detail, what you have done is delineated that zone of adornment, or the full moon idea, which is centered with a wide belt. So amazing for her, really, really cute. So here's another example of the zone, that region. And in this case, it's done partially with the print of the fabric. Now, this is a fabric that has not a lot of print on the top and the bottom, so that works perfectly, because it's like the ornament is kind of reduced. So this is like the waning and the waxing moon, right? And then the full moon area, the region of adornment, has pleating, it has extra fabric, it has a ruffle, it has the darkness of the print coming, like coalescing there, and also the belt. All of it bringing in strengthening the focal point, but it has a V that gives it a beautiful V neckline with a strong shoulder. And I should just mention one more beautiful thing about this. There's a lovely rhythm created here by the black ribbon at the top of that sweater, and then that's repeated in the shoe. Very, very cute. And this is a style that can match the shoe to the outfit, but usually, in fact, I would say always, the matching is done by the background color. Okay, and also can sometimes wear like a light shoe. So this is just a very beautiful dress for her. Now this dress is a much more dominant print, and this is the kind of print that a refined classic that wears prints would be looking for. This kind of streaming, kind of like as if someone is not dreaming, nothing is forming, but like aware of, shall we say, the sound of a river in the background, and so it's like just sleeping. And so this is what you have here. But this fabric, besides being the right kind of fabric, any refined classic can wear print if it's used to simulate ornament or adornment on the fabric. And this does happen here with the yellow and red belt. And then you see the darker gray. There's also some green there, but it's repeated below and above the belt. So that's the gray is forming that region. It's bounded by the dark, the black on the bottom below the belt, that first area. And then the fabric is lovely for refined classic because it's very soft, it's very lightweight, but it still holds its shape. And it also, it works really well with the V neckline. And here's another thing that I should point out is that despite the fact that she is fitted on the upper torso, she still can wear a wide lapel, just like she still wears a wide sleeve, because the only part that's really alpha is the torso. So then another example of the region of adornment is this beautiful dress. But this is also showing you some of that balance I mentioned earlier, because what you see here is that there is the region of applique. Those are appliqued like flowers. They're not really well defined, which is great for her. But then there's netting that has no applique. So there's that balance between adornment and fabric that is not adorned that you see here. And one more thing that I would just like to point out for this beautiful dress is that really lovely way of accentuating the shoulder by using the same applique. So this really strengthens, and it basically forms like a V for her, even though it's not 100% a V neckline, but it's still very effective because of that. In this dress, there's a love affair between refined classics and lace. But sometimes it's a bit of a love-hate relationship, because lace can be overpowering if it's used for the entire outfit, because there's no balance between the part that's adorned and the part that isn't adorned. But what's happening here, because of the fact that it's a black on sheer lace, and she has a black little bodysuit underneath, and the bodysuit is creating that region of adornment that, because it's black, it ends up to be stronger than the lace itself. So that allows this fully laced dress to work beautifully for her. Still has a lovely V neckline, and then the skirt opening out beautifully in her silhouette with omega skirt on the bottom. And lastly, I'd like to take you back to this extravagantly beautiful dress, because it does something else. It does two things else that I wanted to point out that are just wonderful for a refined classic. So first of all, it's like an extremely elegant dress with a well-defined region of adornment, which is what we're calling like her full moon of light and passion, and really gorgeous. So her region of adornment is well-defined. But then another thing that's happening here is that because the fabric is so lightweight, you can see that she actually can carry a lot more skirt. And this is something to understand, is that the fabric weight really does affect what you can do with the silhouette. And then the third thing that this dress does is, without using any shine or any sparkle, or it's just using sort of handwork techniques of pleating and tucks there, and just beautiful cut to the bodice and the little peplum. She's creating a garment that is so spectacular and sophisticated. And this is really important because the Refined Classic actually does not have shine in her fabric portfolio. And so this is obvious that it's not necessary to have shine to show these beautiful dresses. Only the harmonic Refined Classic wears shine, but the sculptural does not even really wear shine. So it kind of can detract if it's too powerful. And in this case, you can see how gorgeous it is without that. So thank you very much for sharing with me the solving of the riddle of the Refined Classic, because the truth is that's what we're doing every time. And the solution is always wrapped up in the focal point, and the solution to everyone's riddle is also what I always call the inspiration, because it's like an image that helps you understand what's happening here and how to think about it so that you can do it in every single outfit. So thank you, Frida, and thank you everyone for coming, and thank you very much for subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Take care.